Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slapendipity, Hobos of Happy Slappy Town, episode 11. My name is Devin, but you can call me Gibbity Toilet, and I'm here with the Air Rizzler, Eric.
Oh, it's gonna be E-Riz.
E-Riz. E-Rizzler?
Thank you. Nah. So I had a fever dream for a hot second where
Yeah.
we had to, I forget what it was. We were in a group chat talking, and it was after we had recorded an episode, and I saw like Skibbity, but instead of Skibbity, I saw Gibbity. We hang out a lot. Is what my brain is telling me subliminally.
But that really happened, Eric.
It really did. And then our
My
friends
name
were
is
like,
actually
"That's
Gibbity."
stupid. Eric should be E-Riz." Here we are.
And
Now
here we
I'm
are
the
embarrassing
E-Riz
ourselves.
for you lovely folk. How do you like our clown makeup? Does it look good? I applied a little bit more today.
And that just means that this is going to be the greatest episode ever. We
Oh
talked
my
last
gosh.
time. We talked last time about how this is kind of like a repilot, right? Like this is like the new episode 1. The first 10 were all practice. This is legit. This is putting our best foot forward now.
Yeah. What?
And
Yeah.
the reason is that a few days ago we launched the podcast. Do you want to talk about that experience, Eric?
Not really. I don't want to
Too
pull back the
traumatized?
curtain. You
Too
keep trying to pull
traumatized?
back the curtain. And a little trauma, maybe. But you keep trying to pull it back. I'm trying to keep it there. I'm a nice clown mime performer, performing for our lovely audience, and I have a nice backdrop behind me, and my lovely assistant keeps trying to go, "Look, kids, look at all the face paint he has."
The rabbit was in the hat the whole time.
The hat's actually 12 feet long. That's how he's able to keep so many in there. But then
The
it's
hat is a
on a
metaphor.
stool.
The hat is a metaphor for Spotify, which wouldn't let us upload the podcast for like 24 hours.
And then it just worked.
And then it just worked, and then we couldn't launch, and then there was issues with the video and the titles, and oh my god, it was so much.
And
But it's up
Apple
now.
Podcasts wants you to create an Apple account or something, and gosh.
So it should
And
be up. It should be up on all major platforms except Apple, but maybe Apple too.
We'll figure out what we want to do with Apple. I don't know, man. It's ooh, I'm Apple. I'm special. You're not. You're not. You just try to be.
By the time you guys hear this, it might all be good. We might be good.
Definitely maybe. Definitely maybe.
Definitely maybe. Okay. I guess if we're not going to talk about the launch of the show, probably the most important thing in the entire history of the show, we can move on to a different story.
What do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about how there's 2 minutes of dead air on one of the episodes at the ending because I goofed it?
Episode 4. Yeah, episode 4.
And there's probably more episodes that may or may not, but no one needs to know that because hopefully that may or may not be all fixed, unless it's not just as like a so this bit makes sense like a month later from when people
Very possible.
listen to their episodes. Oh no. Oh no.
So what we decided to do is that the first 5 episodes went live on launch day, and we're going to do 2 a week until we catch up to the present. So when you're listening to this, I believe you're still going to be in the backlog. But it doesn't really matter because there is no time underneath our magic anywhen bridge.
Or whenever.
So it's still good. It's all good. It's all good. The whenever bridge.
Yeah.
So, like, it doesn't matter that you're going to be listening to this at, like, the end of May, or also potentially sometime far in the future, and we're going to be talking about the events of May the 4th.
Nothing happened.
Lots of things happened, Eric. It was Star Wars Day.
It was a day.
It was a day. let me tell you about my day. So last week, I talked about this. I was in the middle of my dopamine detox. I wasn't watching any TV. I wasn't using any social media. I wasn't doing like all this stuff. I wasn't reading books. I wasn't doing anything that would distract me from living in the moment. So if I was ever like, I want to look at my phone, or I want to disassociate for a few hours and watch television, couldn't do that. I had to just live in what I was doing. If I was driving my car, the only thing I was doing was driving my car. No music, nothing. And I did this from one Wednesday morning to the next Wednesday morning. I did this between the penultimate episode of Star Wars The Bad Batch to the series finale of Star Wars The Bad Batch. And when I finally sat down to watch that episode, I was like, oh my god, I get to watch television. And let me tell you, like, it was fine. It wasn't like an addict coming back to like something that they were addicted to. I was just like, oh yeah, TV. This is something I do all the time. It doesn't matter that I haven't watched it in a week. That's fine.
Well, and as we've talked about in previous episodes, that's how TV used to be. You had to wait a week anyway.
Yeah, but between then, you watch multiple shows, or there was like Jeopardy every day. Like, you could have the TV on, you could listen to music, you could read books. My thing is just like re-entering into this world. I feel like I didn't really.
You're not a.
I'm not a changed
for your
person.
Next hit.
Yeah, I didn't feel like I was addicted at any point. You know, the comparison between all this stuff and addiction is just not apt. And I feel like I didn't really change as a person. I learned a couple things. Like, I think I said this last week, that I'm, like, I do not feel bad about not playing Marvel Snap anymore, so I've just erased that from my life, which is a good thing. And I'm now aware of how much I spend listening to podcasts and YouTube, and how much of my like day that takes up, but it doesn't stop me from doing other things. So it's like right, like I don't have a problem. The definition of something being a disorder is that it like disrupts your daily life, and this is not that.
That's good.
The one like takeaway that I'm gonna take away is that by cutting off all of those things and living in the moment, it made that week feel like the longest week of my life. And I think that is important. It made me realize that, like, you know, just disassociating, living all these other lives through these stories makes your own adventure, the own story of your own life, shorter. And I think that is an important thing to have realized.
It's pretty deep, man. It's pretty deep.
Yeah. So, Star Wars The Bad Batch.
Is it a bad batch of Star Wars?
No, it's a good batch of episodes. I very much enjoyed it. But that's not the only thing that happened around the beginning of May, especially for Star Wars Day. So, they decided for the 25th anniversary of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, that they would re-release it in theaters. And so it was all this big hype train. There's been, like, no big movies the last couple of weeks. Like, Challengers, no one came to see that. Tarot, that was not a good movie. Nobody came to see that either. This week, the movies were Star Wars and Fall Guy. And Star Wars, at least on opening night at my theater, destroyed Fall Guy.
Yay?
And it's not so much a yay as it is just, like, a re-release of a 25-year-old movie that anybody at home can watch on VHS or DVD or Blu-ray or Disney+. People came into the theater to see it in bigger numbers than a newly released movie starring Ryan Gosling, who was like the biggest man of the year last year because of Barbie.
Yeah, well, you know, Star Wars has the nostalgia factor going for it.
Yeah, and it's so funny to me that, like, the general take from the public, right? Oh my god, the prequels, those are terrible. You have the, you know, the image of someone like Red Letter Media, like just this old balding fat guy being like, they ruined my Star Wars. Meanwhile, all these people coming in to watch The Phantom Menace, you know, there's like guys in their 50s, guys in their 40s. You know, you had this old balding man wearing like a, you know, triple XL t-shirt coming in, but the triple XL t-shirt was like the poster of The Phantom Menace, and he was hyped. This man was waiting outside our door for half an hour before we opened to be first in line to see The Phantom Menace. Like the way that just Star Wars fans and cultures have turned around and are now expressing their love for the prequels is amazing, and I'm so here for it. Phantom Menace is not my favorite Star Wars movie. It might actually be like my second least favorite Star Wars movie, but it's still a good time.
And that's what matters. Having a good time with a good-ish movie.
A good-ish movie. There were so many people who came in dressed in full Jedi robes, but the one that like I'm gonna remember is there was this person. I'm guessing it was a father and son. They were both in Jedi robes, and the son had like a shorter lightsaber. His was like purple, and the dad's was like blue. And then there's who I'm guessing is like the teenage daughter, and she was wearing like imperial military like flight outfit. Like her pants were tucked into her boots, and she had a an imperial like they're like these little like gray and red squares that they wear on like their lapel or their chest. And so she was like an Imperial officer, and then you have the two Jedi, and they were all coming to see it as a family. And the guy tried to use like the Jedi mind trick and ask like, "Oh, how many credits for the ticket?" And the bartender goes, "You're paying with a credit card?" And then the dad goes, "Never mind, just forget it."
Oh,
I'm like, bro, that's so sad.
get
That's so
mated.
sad. If it was me up there, I would have been like,
This isn't Disney
yeah,
World.
yeah, right. Like none of us were in character. So sad. If I was up there, I would have been like, Republic credits are no good out here. I need something more real. And then the dad would have been like, oh, credits will do fine. And then I could have been like, no, they won't. What, you think you're some kind of Jedi waving your hand around like that? I'm a Tordarian. Mind tricks don't work on me. Only money. And then that would have been great.
Yes.
What's your favorite Star Wars movie, Eric?
Maybe Rogue One, because that's the least to do about Star Wars
That's rough, buddy.
out of all of them.
Have you
Star Wars is kind of
have you
mid.
seen all of them? We made you sit down to watch A New Hope in like 2016.
I you made me sit down to watch the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, episode 1, and that's it. I don't think you guys forced me to watch episode 2 and 3.
Well, because at that point you should have been so hyped that you would just watch them on your own.
And I did not.
You didn't watch the good
I
ones.
did not.
That's so sad.
But and then I also watched Rogue One. Rogue One has, as I said earlier, so little to do with the established plot, and it is just an action movie set in Star Wars land. That it was fine. It was good. That's also why Star Wars Visions, the Disney,
The anime.
like, yeah, the Disney animes thing they did, that's also their best Star Wars stuff.
It's a non-canonical TV
Anything
show.
to,
They grabbed a
yeah,
bunch of anime studios, said you can make whatever you want, stylized around Star Wars, and then all these studios just made whatever they wanted. And that's your favorite Star
yes,
Wars? You're
yeah,
wrong.
probably. Star Wars is mid.
Wrong.
I don't know what to tell you.
Star Wars is peak. Peak.
I think if like there's too much the stuff I would find interesting about Star Wars, I feel like they don't go for unless it's in like the extended stuff. And I'm not putting that much of a time commitment to maybe get to the thing that I would find interesting out of hundreds of hours of content.
What do you find interesting?
Like, well, like, hey, the Jedi and the Sith are both stupid.
That is correct. That's the moral
Why
of the
don't we
prequels.
try for this like gray route
No.
or to keep with a color theme, or how do lightsabers get made? Why does no one else make them? Where the guy in the sequel trilogy, I'll give it up for that one stormtrooper who he had a weapon that could rival a lightsaber, and You know, just like everyone else, it was hype, and then he dies, and then we never see that again, despite having an effective weapon to rival a lightsaber.
You mean the stormtrooper who
Oh,
yells traitor and then activates his electro staff that we have seen plenty of times before? That's the signature weapon of the Mana Guards during the
never
prequels
seen
that
it
shows up all the time.
before.
You mean you want to watch a story like the 3-episode arc of the Clone Wars where people build their own lightsabers?
It's never been done
Never
before,
been
and if it
done.
has been, it's buried in hundreds of hours of content
Okay,
that I don't want to put the time investment into.
that's fair.
Or like the other thing that I like, and I'm aware to an extent this is kind of just storytelling. At least it feels like, I feel like so many stories are okay. Here's one of my more overarching annoyances. It's not like an actual grievance I have, haha, with Star Wars per se, but it's like, oh, this is one or two families' dirty laundry being like air dried into the rest of the galaxy. It's literally the Palpatines and the Skywalkers going, "You're mean, no, you're mean, no," for 9 movies. And you know, it's boring and lame and dumb.
No,
And
it's so
the
cool.
further away you can get from family, that family drama, the better, I think. And to an extent, I think that's just stories, right? Like you focus on the main character and then, you know, the loved ones of the main character, which is their families and friends. So like all stories are kind of like that, but like, oh, we have 9 movies
10 if you count
of
the
just
animated
one
Clone Wars
guy.
TV show.
Well, yeah, and then it's more absurd.
Hmm? I just think that also if you count Han Solo being married into the family, then there's another one. I think that there are a lot of Star Wars fans who are like, I want to get away from the Skywalker like family and explore more of the galaxy. I am not in
Yeah,
that camp whatsoever. Star Wars is a
lame.
story about Anakin Skywalker that is set in this vast galaxy, and I have no issues exploring other areas of the galaxy, right? Like if you have something like the
Okay.
Jedi Fallen Order games, or you have the Bad Batch, or you have these shows and these
Hmm.
spin-offs, the Acolyte, the High Republic era, that's filling in these areas of the setting that we've never seen before, or exploring the mythology. But everything comes back to every single aspect of the franchise Star Wars needs to relate in some way to the decision of Anakin when he fell to the dark side in Revenge of the Sith, and the decision of Anakin when he came back to the light side in Return of the Jedi. That is the story.
Okay. So on one hand, I'll agree with you, right? If you know, I haven't watched episode 2 and 3, but overall, yeah, it's about Anakin being Jesus and all of the consequences and ramifications on how he Jesus. That's fine, but he's dead now. We need to move past that. He's gone. That's okay. He had a great run. We're done. We're donezo. He's not a full Jesus. He didn't get resurrected. He's not coming back. He ascended. He's in heaven. Leave him there. Leave. He's done. He's done. We spent 3 movies of his grandson being like, "Oh my gosh, Grandpa, I don't know, man. It's just like really hard, and I have a lot of feelings, and I have to be evil." Oh no, I don't. Bye, Grandpa. Like, what do we? Is Kylo gonna have a kid? And even though he's already dead, don't worry about it. And he's spoilers, I guess. Whoops.
I think we'll avoid
And
spoiling any of like the extended media of Star Wars, but the nine movies, if you care at all, you've already seen them.
are we gonna have Anakin's great grandson? And he goes, "Wow, this is the visor of his helmet. Truly, this is no.
There
Make
was a
your own
book.
decisions."
There was a book in the old expanded universe called like The Glove of Darth Vader,
That's dumb!
Yes, it is, and the old expanded universe was quite silly. But yeah, like
No,
I think using your Jesus comparison, like the entire Old Testament from a Christian perspective is these prophecies and this setup to the arrival of Jesus. The first 4 books in the New Testament is the life of Jesus, and then the entire rest of the Bible is the legacy of Jesus. So you can have the sequel trilogy or any content that comes afterwards being the legacy of the important character moment that the entire franchise is about. And like you said, it's Kylo being like, I want to be like Darth Vader. And then being like, actually, I want to be like Anakin. And then he fulfills Anakin's desire. Oh my god, it's so good. Anakin turned evil because he wanted to stop the ones he cared about from dying. But you can't do that if you're evil. You gotta be good to do that. So when Ben turns good, the one thing he does, his final act in life, is stopping the one he cares about from dying. Oh my god, he finally fulfilled the prophecy.
No, it's all bad. I'm sorry. They don't. None of it was planned out enough to feel like that. I mean, some of it was, some of it wasn't. But, oh, I just learned about force healing off screen 3 minutes ago. Time to force heal via a kiss, because we have to have romance in it. And, okay,
They're
I
like
guess Rey isn't dead now, even though she totally was.
Ben and Rey are like cosmological cousins, so I hope that there was no romance there.
I mean, he kissed her to bring her back to life, so
No,
like, I don't.
he brought her back and then they kissed.
Okay, so it's worse, is what you're telling me. I think there's also a thing to be said for like, I mean, you're in your camp, I'm in my camp. We're not gonna change each other's minds, Beth, and I have a feeling, an inkling, if you will. However, to just to just linger on, right? Okay, there's so much lore and stuff that apparently happens in Star Wars, and when I watched the main 9 movies, or 7, I saw none of it. Like, oh, it's this great crazy universe and all these things happen and and cool, where is it? Oh, it's not. Luke does some stuff. Luke is cool.
So when
Rey is dumb.
that's almost by design. When George Lucas was
That's
making Star Wars, one of his biggest influences, besides like Dune and Kurosawa and all this stuff, was watching serials of Flash Gordon, which is this old sci-fi show. So he had this experience where you turn on the television or you go to the movies and it's before the movie starts as there's a little short and watching an adventure that was on like part 7 of 16 and then tuning in next time and now he's on part 12 of 16 or tuning in the time after that and it's the next arc, and it implies this ongoing story and narrative that he is only seeing 1 or 2 episodes of in the middle of the story. The other, he was also super inspired by like documentaries, World War II and Vietnam and all that stuff that was happening. So he had this documentarian film approach to the story. So there's this like quote that he didn't really set things up to do blocking, right? Like he'll set the camera up and have the action play out in front of him, as opposed to like putting the camera somewhere where it's focused on the main character. There's this very good comparison where one of the first shots of Star Wars Episode 5, The Empire Strikes Back, which was not directed by Lucas, the camera does this cool movement across this entire section of the Rebel base, and then it stops moving in front of Leia as she begins to speak. And it's a cool shot, but Lucas would never have done that because he filmed it more like a documentary. The other huge inspiration to him, like I just said, was Akira Kurosawa, who is a Japanese filmmaker. And what Lucas really liked about watching Japanese film is that they were made for a Japanese audience. And so there were certain things from their culture that the filmmaker and the writer just expected the audience to understand. Whether it's like what the house looked like and what every single piece and appliance that they used inside the house did, or the culture and the religion and like, oh, this is the way of the samurai, but they don't explain it because everyone knows the way of the samurai. And he goes into it, and he doesn't speak the language, so he's reading subtitles, and he's not part of the culture. So he has to, he sees these characters acting in really weird ways, because to them, it's normal. And so he took these three things. He's like, okay, I want a culture where everyone in the culture understands exactly what's going on, but the audience has no idea. I want to film it like a documentary, and I want to start with episode 4, so that people coming in see it as them just entering into a serial. And that's why Star Wars is like that. It's a documentary that you're seeing half of.
Cool, it's
about
bad.
a completely alien culture.
It's mid. I won't say bad.
Okay, we can stop talking about Star Wars. And we're going to segue by talking about Star Wars.
Make a good movie.
So part of May 4th is the launching of a bunch of new Lego Star Wars sets and a big sale on Lego.com for those Star Wars sets. And I bought a lot of them. Like, so many. I love them. I have a big investment in Lego where I will buy sets, and then you do nothing with them, and then they discontinue them, and then you sell them for significantly more money than you bought them for.
Go on.
I do that. So I guess I wanna segue into talking about Lego for a minute.
All right. I'm just loving the silence.
Okay, you got nothing?
No, yeah. Uh, uh,
That's your opinion? You think it's mid?
Kind of. It's advanced scalping. But it's not scalping, but it is, but it's not. Meh.
Scalping would be if you buy up like every piece, and then you immediately flip it for more than like it's being sold for because they're now limited edition, but you have like too many of them. What I'm doing is like, and this is legitimately how I see it because like I've experienced this before, where I look at something that like was made 10 years ago and then was discontinued, and I'm like, I want that. Gee, I sure do hope that somebody on eBay bought one at the time, kept it in good condition, so that I can now have it. Right? Like, and doing that is a service that's being provided. Me buying one of these sets is not preventing anybody else right now from buying it. But in a few years, if someone wants one and wants the experience of, opening it or having it just like they had bought it themselves, I can provide them that service.
Secondhand markets are weird.
Aftermarket markets are legit, especially, I have a lot of like other stuff like Pokemon cards and whatever where that's really important. Anyway, the general discussion I want to talk about with Lego is how the reason that I got into it as an adult, besides it being a COVID, obsession. Also, I think a lot of people, especially people who watch me on YouTube, think that it's been like this big part of my life, but I literally only got into it during COVID.
Yeah, you didn't care much beforehand.
No, I had zero care.
I think outside of the obvious, like, Millennium Falcon.
Well, again, I got the big Millennium Falcon after COVID. My interest in Lego as a medium is because I have this extreme interest. I keep saying the word interest, but I have this very deep interest in alternative ways of storytelling. In storytelling that's not just, I'm going to say prose, right, like a normally written book, or is not just like a motion picture like a movie. Other interesting ways of telling stories are fascinating to me because it helps break down to the base element of what a story is, right? Like, if you play video games, there's something called environmental storytelling, where if you walk into a room and there's like, there's like all the desks are flipped over and there's like inkwells that have spilled and something's on fire, you can be like, wow, something really bad happened here. And that's like literally the most basic form of environmental storytelling, where nobody stops and says, a monster ravaged through the office, but you can tell that happened because you're seeing the aftermath. So in video games, that's, again, environmental storytelling. So I love things like that. And what Lego can do, and you especially see this if you watch something like Lego Masters, great TV show, or if you buy some of the more expensive sets, like, oh my god, the Spider-Man Daily Bugle, it's amazing for this, is by posing the characters in, like, you're basically watching a moment in time. You're seeing a frozen moment because it's a model, and the way that the characters are positioned and designed, and the way that the environment can be changed to imply motion, to imply that something happened a second ago and something else is going to happen in 1 second, is just this amazing artistic medium that I am not good at designing, right? Like, I can't do that. I can't build a model like that. But I really like looking at the completed model because it gives you that illusion of motion that's not really there, but like also it is. And I very much liken it to the difference between a movie like film and a comic book panel, because there is no motion in comic book panels, but it still implies motion. And so I see these dioramas as the same as like a still image in a comic book. And especially when you have things like Star Wars Legos, right? Where looking at the diorama, I'm like, I know what happened a moment before and a moment later because I've seen the movie, but you still have this single moment in time, this single frame that has been like reduced to its barest element, so it's recognizable because it's in like Lego brick. But it's also then captured the one single moment in time, but it tells a story. Oh my god, it's so cool! And I just love alternative methods of storytelling like that, and that is why I like Lego as an adult.
That's beautiful, dear. But, that's good. That's fun. I don't have
What?
anything snarky to say about it.
So like I know that you have read comic books, Eric, especially and like manga, right? And it's a very
Yeah,
similar thing. You read manga, you've read a lot of comic books and graphic novels. So like have you ever stopped and thought about the construction of the comic book and how it helps tell the story?
Devin, I'm so glad you asked. No.
when
Um,
when you started talking, I took a sip of my water and I literally just spat it over my lap.
you're welcome. So I don't. It depends, I guess. I think I put in as much attention or effort as like for right with this specific like implied movement thing. It is mostly manga. Um, I will put in as much attention and effort into following things along as the mangaka, the author, slash also draw or put into it. So if it's just like a lot of like you got your four squares on a page and it's just kind of going and I'm just gonna read it. If the art's really pretty, I'll look back at it or whatever. There is, however, a manga series called Witch Hat Atelier, and it's very cool and very pretty. And I think it's one of the. It currently does not have an anime adaptation, and as far as I know, there are no talks about it getting one. Not that it couldn't, but like, and I think that is not for the best per se, but like an potentially smart decision. The way that Witch Hat makes its manga is like it really focuses on the page that it's used, right? A lot of manga, you have your page and your 4 panels, 5 panels, whatever, and you read from right to left and you just move on to the next page and you follow the like images within the panels and just move along. Witch Hat Atelier will like play with that. So they'll like have a character exist outside of the panels because it's like her walking down the street. So it'll have like, 3 panels to the sides of these different shops or whatever. And then she is like outside of the panels, like implied walking down, looking at each of them as she walks down the street, and that's really cool. And they'll also like use like I forget what you call it. I'm bad with words. Like flourishes, I guess, for like the edges of the manga panel, right? So like when a character is giving exposition based off a story or a myth or whatever, the like pages and panels will have this like, kind of like child book, like Once Upon a Time style, like like the like plants and vines growing around in the pages, and like, because you're in this like surreal learning, like learning about a story, right? And so to help make it like fun and to read, it also separates it from like the main, the story of the main character, right? Because now we're in the exposition, but it's based on this whatever. So we're gonna have add these elements to separate those two a little bit. And like you can see the fantastical elements blur their ways in and blah blah blah. And it's very good manga.
So the one thing you said about like walking down the street and like looking at panels or whatever, that okay, like I have two more things to talk about the form of comic books with, and one of them is this really cool concept where, and this is like apocryphal, or like it's not like a thing that like really happens 100% of the time, but there's this idea that like a master will go to his apprentice, the apprentice painter, author, a drawer, what's the word? Artist. That's the word, artist.
There you go.
The person will talk to the artist apprentice when they're trying to draw comic books and will say, "I want you to draw a scene for me." And the scene is there's a character standing in a room with a closed door. They open the door and enter into the next room. Draw that in as few panels as possible. With no words. And so then it's a test of the apprentice to be able to depict this action in as few panels as possible with no words. So Eric, if you stop and think for a second about, and like I know that neither of us are artists, but I think that we've read enough comic book / manga to be able to visualize like the way that drawings can convey motion. How many panels do you think it's possible in?
0.
How could you do it in 0?
You just use the spine of the book to convey the door, and then you just have them go from one page to the other.
But then that's 2.
Well, but that's separate pages.
Oh, that's the bottom, the last panel on a page and the first panel on the next page are still 2 panels.
Yeah, but just don't draw a panel. Just have it exist on the page.
So you're still drawing the person twice.
Oh, I mean, sure.
Like, drawing them in one room and then in the next room, that's 2 drawings, right?
Yeah, I guess the only other way you could, like... I don't know if you drew them, like, halfway in between the door, but that kind of feels like it's cheating.
If they're halfway through the door, how do you indicate that the door was previously closed?
True.
Anyway, so like it's not like there's a right answer or like one way that you're supposed to solve the problem.
Well,
I think that like it can be done in one panel, and the idea is that like yes, you would have them standing on one foot in the first room with the other foot, crossing the threshold of the door, and you have motion lines to indicate that the door had just been closed.
Well, that's what I said.
And the idea, yeah, I know it's what you said, but the idea is that you have like 3 actions, standing in room 1, door opening, standing in room 3,
sure.
Standing in room 2, I mean. And you can convey this in one single drawing, right? Now, not every single comic book is supposed to be written in, as few panels as possible. Sure. But it's this artistic exercise of like 3 actions doesn't mean 3 drawings, or 2 scenes doesn't actually mean 2 scenes. And so again, you have this moment in time that implies the moment that came before and implies the moment that comes next, but it's only one snapshot of an instance. And and I'm using that as an example because it goes back to like my appreciation of dioramas. You can also do the thing that sometimes comic books, manga do, where like you have a character walking and behind them is like a less colored in or like a gray outline of them walking, and then behind that is a different version, behind that is a different version to convey that, like, that's in the past, right? And you can do that in all sorts of ways. There's one comic book, I believe it's about Dick Grayson, Robin, or Nightwing, whatever, and the comic doesn't have panels, so it'll have, like, it'll show the cityscape, right? And then it just has Robin on the left running from a building, and then, in front of him he's jumping, and then he's landing, and then he's rolling, and then he's running again. And so it's one picture, but again, it's implying this motion because you're reading it left to right. So every instance of him, you're understanding that happens in the future, even though the image itself is static. Anyway, super interesting. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. What's your second thing? Or was it
my second thing? No, so the second thing is just the concept of the graphic novel movie, whatever, Watchmen. Which I brought up a couple episodes ago when we were talking about Dune and, like, just the way that time passes. So Watchmen, first of all, amazing graphic novel, amazing movie. I'm a movie apologist. But part of the story is that there's a character, Dr. Manhattan, who is able to see all of time at once.
Yeah.
And so he sort of lives in this very detached way where he's like, nothing matters because everything is everywhere, which is a very cringe philosophy to have. I hate nihilism. So I'm not going to give away any spoilers to the story, but one of the things that happens is that he receives a reason for believing that, like, there's more meaning to life even though time is eternal, etc., etc. But one of the reasons that Watchmen, I believe, can only be told in its purest form in a comic book is because, as a comic book, unlike a movie where you can tell a story but you can't actually tell a story for the reason I'm about to say, in a comic book, you, the reader, are seeing the past, present, and future at the same time. If you look at the page of a comic book, especially if it's laid out, which Watchmen famously is, in 9 panels on a single page, when you first flip the page, you see all 9 panels. So you can see the future. When you look at an image, you're looking at both the art and the word bubble, and you have to decide if you're going to look at the art first or if you're going to read the word bubble first. You have to understand that both those things, both the art and the words, are happening at the same time, but you're choosing which comes first in your reading of the story. And as you move your way through the panels, your present is changing, but the past isn't, because it's all still on one page. And it's just this aspect of reading comic books where you know what's coming because you've technically seen the next panel already, you just haven't chosen to process it yet. So you're in control. You can see the past, the present, and the future, but your present is whatever you're currently choosing to process, whether it's a picture or a word bubble in the same image, whether it's one panel or the next panel. You exist as a reader of comic books the way that Dr. Manhattan exists within the universe. And I think that that's why Watchmen literally can only be truly correctly told as a comic book. And that is beautiful to me.
That is beautiful. I'd say correctly told is strong, but the most empathetic viewing experience.
I just believe that even in the movie, which again, I love the movie, because you miss this aspect, it's, as an adaptation, we talked about adaptations like for a whole episode, but because you're removing this aspect of the story, it changes the story enough.
Well, but I also think that's not something anyone would realize on their first read through. They'd be like, I'm reading a comic book, yeah. And then when they finish it, they'd no. And then they'd reread it and go, oh my gosh, is this what it's, oh no, oh my gosh, no. That's how that plays out in my head.
I liked all of those noises.
Thank you. Please don't listen at 2 times speed. It'll make it sound way worse.
we got a comment where someone said that they were listening in the car and that Eric made a noise coming out of their car speaker at 2 times speed that they did not enjoy.
Yeah, it was my Homer and Simpson impression of like basking over a donut, and it sounded wrong to them. Don't listen at 2 times speed. What can I tell you?
Yeah, like when Homer goes, donut, and then makes a drooling sound. Eric did that. They did not.
I won't do it again.
One of our few comments from the first 5
Hey,
episodes.
man.
It's only been a couple days since those went up.
Life is a marathon, not a race. And you know what else isn't a race?
What's not a race?
Legrand Chase.
But who's chasing them if it's not a race?
That's for them to find out.
That's for you to decide. We'll be right back.
Dun, 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 dun.
Wow, Eric, the mail's here.
We don't have mail, Devin. We're under a bridge. We have no mailbox. We can't get mail.
That's why I took that egg crate from earlier, put it on top of the bridge, wrote hobos on it, and people are dropping their letters in.
Sounds fake.
That's how we got the mail.
What happened to my
Anyway,
bucket?
we got one.
I had a bucket dolly system.
No, it's not a
Like in
a bucket dolly system.
I got some rope in a bucket, tied it around, threw it over the guardrail of the bridge.
Well, yeah, that's your mailbox. My egg crate is my mailbox. For when they want to address something to Gibby, they address it to me. They want to address something to Rizzler, they give it to you.
Oh. Sorry, I just thought we shared.
So the letter I got, it's addressed to me. It says, if Eric didn't correct your pronunciation of Tajin, I would have strongly worded this message to you.
Tajin.
Tajin. The margarita spice.
Yeah, okay.
And that's it. That's our mailbag.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening to the inaugural comment, the first comment in this series. Please leave your own comments in the email slapendipity@gmail.com. And then like the man of the post office writes that down on a letter and sends it to us. That's how we read these. Anyway,
do you think the postman likes Tajin?
I think if you put Tajin in your envelope and try to mail it, you might get arrested.
No, wait. Okay, so you know how you have to lick envelopes? What if you put a little bit of Tajin on the glue? So when you go to lick it, you get like a little surprise.
You know how people will like sniff glue to get high? So in my imagination, I'm just inventing this new drug where it's like, okay, you sniff the glue to get high, but you also put some Tajin in it and you snort it like cocaine. And then that kills you.
Yeah, that'd be a really spicy.
And then you get the superpowers from Dune.
What a throwback callback. Walk back.
Please don't try that at home, kids.
Tajin should only be used responsibly.
On popcorn.
Yeah, it's okay.
Anyway, I wanna finish my little rant here about alternative methods of storytelling. I recall in high school that I hope I'm remembering this correctly.
We're gonna find out.
You read, or started reading, or tried to read a book called House of Leaves.
Oh, yeah, that's true. That is true.
Tell me your experience about it.
So I got like halfway through and then I stopped because I was for like a summer reading and I think school started and I think I was like, well, no point in keeping reading this. It was a good, fun book. Spoilers for House of Leaves, I guess. Gosh, it's been so long. It's a story about a tattoo artist finding a story about a man finding a hole in his house that is way too deep, who finds videotapes of people exploring the hole in his house. It's so much. It's so much. I
It's
might have butchered that a little. Maybe there's a little bit
mhm.
less, but there's definitely videotapes. There's definitely a tattoo artist because he sleeps with a woman named Thumper because she has Thumper from Bambi tattooed on her inner thigh. He also spills paint because he becomes so disheveled from trying to make sense of all of this. And there is a dad that does explore a hole with his friend, maybe son, and they all definitely go crazy. And I'm pretty sure videotapes were involved somewhere. And they all write like
so
cliff
the
notes for each other.
I've not read the book. I also know that it started as like an online thing before it was published in a physical book. But the story isn't what matters as much as the format of the book, which, like Eric said, is focused on this guy finding journal entries and videos. So you have like three narratives going on at once, but the pages of this book are filled with like oh, here's the document he found, and then it's just like an entire page of a list of names.
Yeah.
Or you flip the page and there's like a hole in the middle of the page, and like property records and like stuff that you're not supposed to actually read, right? Like the main takeaway I got from looking and flipping through the book was like there cannot be an audio book of the book because it
Oh
would be
no. There
incomprehensible.
is a page.
Completely incomprehensible.
There's a page. I never got to it, but I, flipped through the book when I got it. There is a page where, Devin, how are words put on a page?
With a laser jet printer.
No, stop it. How are,
Left to right, up and down.
yes. So they saw that
Mhm.
and said, nah, that's lame. And they used individual words over the course of 2 pages to form a spiral that just goes in on itself. I think it's over 2 pages.
Yeah, so
It's
you would need, you know how like there's blind people can like watch movies with audio description. In order to make this an audiobook, you would need to have an audio descriptor, right? Like you'd
yeah,
have to have a second narrator come in and say, and then there is 2 pages of addresses with some of them crossed out in red marker.
yeah.
Next page.
You have one page that's like, you know, he went and got his paintbrushes and da 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 da. And then under that, you have the other audio person coming in going, okay, so there's a cliff note saying, a footnote rather, saying that blue shovel means this. And it would just go on. It's so much. There's
Yes,
so
it
much. It's such a dense, crazy book.
I as a kid, so they released three things that are supposed to be like within the Harry Potter universe. Three books that are supposed to be like the textbooks that students would have at Hogwarts. There's like Quidditch Through the Ages and Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, etc. And if you're reading like the textbook, you have things like Harry's handwriting where he's scribbling things in the margins. And my mother tried to read this to us as kids, and she like couldn't
Yeah.
because she would like read a sentence and then try to read like what Harry wrote. And me as just sitting there listening would be like, wait, I don't understand how that sentence follows the previous sentence. And then she got frustrated and we only read like the first chapter of one of them.
Sounds about right.
But and it kind of reminds me of there's a Gravity Falls book. It's like a notebook that actually appears in the show. It's an in-universe book. And there's like puzzles and stuff in it. Or there's the Five Nights at Freddy's security logbook, which some people would call the survival logbook, because on the front, the word security is crossed out and it's written as survival. It's like, okay, so which one is the real title? You can't read those to people.
Yeah. Have you ever looked into the ology books?
Like Dragonology,
Yeah.
Wizardology,
Yeah.
Egyptology, Piratology. I have like 5 of
Yeah.
those.
So those are books where I never actually read one, but they are like uh similar vein, right? Of like survival guides or whatever, of like, this is the journal of the great wizard Salazar, and here are his findings, and then you can like read the book, and then they'll have like physical 3D interactable things of like Salazar's wand, and it's like a bit of wood just like popping up from the book, or it's like, and this was Salazar's final letter, and you can like pull out, like there is an envelope attached to the page, and you can pull out a little letter that was his final letter. Stuff like that.
Yeah, I never read those books cover to cover. I just thought that they were so cool. There's a gem embedded on Wizardology, and like the Dragonology covers like scaled like dragon scales. Like those books were so cool. But yes, you cannot like read them.
Well, you can.
You can, but like again, it's not a narrative the same way that like House of Leaves isn't. It's not a book. It's the book and the entire experience of the book.
Sure,
you know,
sure. I mean, yeah,
it's an alternative.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's an alternative storytelling method, even though it's in the medium of words on a page. So you'd think it's like a novel, but it's not. It's not prose.
It's something more.
I wouldn't say more. I would just say different, and that's why that kind of thing is so interesting to me. So it's kind of related, right? I think that this kind of thing works a lot more in the horror genre, where because it's trying to make you feel a specific way, which is scared, it can take advantage of the medium in ways that like something trying to tell you a story can't, because trying to tell you a story is trying to get information across to you, where I think horror stories are trying to get an emotion across to you,
Sure.
right? I think there might be other examples, but there's really only two examples of like art, creative mediums, where they're not trying to get across a story, they're trying to get across an emotion. There's three examples actually. There's poetry, there's horror, and then there's special videos online that you can watch.
Okay. Yeah.
Those kind of videos. Okay, so so I think that those three things are all in the same category. So there's one of my favorite horror stories is called Ted the Caver. It's a creepypasta. Have you ever heard of it?
I have not.
So it's this series of blog posts about a guy named Ted, and he's a caver, so he goes down into caves. And he has a couple stories about, like, I went in this cave and it was cool. I went spelunking. And then he starts telling the story about this one cave. And so in the blog, there's, like, images, right? And so he tells the story about how, like, he'd go... And this story, overall, thousands and thousands of words. It's very long. And it's split up into what I'm going to say, like, are, like, journal entries. But really, they're, like, blog posts. And it's like, here's a picture I took. Here's a this. Here's a that. And as you get further into the story, he's like... On May 16th, I went in, and I felt someone tugging on the other end of the rope. It's so weird. And then I left and came back. Here's a picture that I took, right? And then you get this feeling of fright of looking into the darkness of this cave and being like, the storyteller just told me that there's something in there. So that's spooky. And, if you look at the image, you're scared that you're going to see some sort of, like, cave person looking back at you. Obviously, there's not. The story makes itself seem very, like, serious and real. Like, this is actually a real blog of some guy who goes into a cave, right? There's no supernatural elements. There's no monster.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it's so weird. I go into this cave and my GPS cuts out, but that doesn't happen anywhere else. So, yeah, as you read the blog, and, the guy's like, I tried to take in my video camera, but, like, I dropped it, and all these examples of, like, what's going on, why this specific cave is weird.
Yeah.
And so you get to a blog post, and he's like, okay, guys, I was finally able to move the one rock out of the way that was preventing me from accessing a deeper part of the tunnel. So I'm going to go in and I'll update you on what I find down there that's been tugging on my rope. And that's the last blog entry.
Mm.
And I just think that, like, you can't do that in a different format, right? Besides, like, a found journal.
Yeah.
But in a found journal, if it's bound in a book the way that, like, Dracula is, you're approaching the end. But on an online blog, as you just, like, scroll down a web page or whatever, you don't know that you're at the end until you are. And I think that's so cool.
There's That is really cool. And if I may, because I am a just a nerd of a person in so many different ways, there's a Japanese version of this. Um, I heard about the story from the Japanese horror podcast of Kowabana by Tara A. Devlin, and it's a pretty famous uh a story, I guess, where it's a similar thing of like this woman was on like a train. She was like, "Oh, I'm so tired," and she was just kind of like messaging on like the equivalent of like Japanese Reddit or whatever, and she explained how like she was super tired and she's just managed to like uh catch a train or something, or she was like in an unfamiliar area and she caught the train, and she was like, "Oh, this train is weird. Like, has anyone heard of the like blah 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 train? Like, this is my situation. This is what happened." And people are like responding to her of like, "Yeah, I've never heard of that train. That's weird. You like maybe need to get off or something." And she was like, "Well, there's no one on the train right now, so like I think it's fine, or at least in my like, individual car. And I'm headed in the direction I need to go, so I think it might be fine." And like the more time passes, the more she like posts like creepier and creepier things, and people are legitimate like interacting with it and being like, "Hey, you know, actually," or giving all these different takes of like, "Well, the last train was actually at this time frame. If your story is correct, you actually missed the last train by like 20 minutes. Like that's not a train that should exist in theory." And then like it just keeps going, and similarly ends with her being like, "Okay, I think I'm gonna go like try and get off at the next station," and then it just stops, and people are like, "Did what? Hello?" And it never posted anything again. And people are like, "Was this just a goof and like someone pranked us essentially? Or is it like a new story? Or was it a legitimate thing of like some woman got like trapped in whatever situation and no one knows?"
Yeah, and even like, oh, is this person mentally ill? Or there's always these, especially when you're watching a horror movie, right? Like I've had this experience a couple times where you're watching it and you're like, I don't know if something supernatural is happening or if somebody is mentally ill. There's a movie called Hereditary that I'm sure a lot of people have heard of and seen, where at least when I was watching it, I was always like, is there anything supernatural going on? Is there people who think something supernatural is going on, and so they're attempting to make it seem supernatural? Or are some of these people mentally ill?
Hmm.
And I'm not going to say what happened at the end. In fact, I am actually not a fan of that movie. But that is something that you're thinking the entire time. And so listening to these stories, it's like, oh, is there a man tugging on the rope? Oh, is there a ghost train?
Yeah,
Or is the person crazy?
right.
And because it's being told like through the medium of the internet, you're also like, is this a creepypasta, or is this real,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and especially like like the idea of if you're like, okay, maybe this is real, and then like all the implications that has of like was like what happened to these people, were what was this an elaborate setup by whatever outside factors, be it other humans or like a weird predator in a cave.
Yeah, and it's
Spooky.
it's it's spooky. There's creepypastas do this a lot, right? Like there's all of the it's called Missing 411, and it's this idea that like, oh, there's some weird coincidences of all of these cases of people who go like missing in national parks and in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little different because what they use is real life cases of disappearances, and then they'll end the story and be like, and that's why it was Bigfoot. So it's a little different because it's not somebody writing a story; it's someone hijacking someone else's actual death,
Right.
but it still has that element of like, this is real, and you get to choose whether you believe it's something supernatural or something mundane or something, some grand conspiracy.
Yeah.
Like this person meant to disappear and did this elaborate hoax versus this person was killed by a bear versus this person was abducted by aliens, right? Like it allows you to believe one or the other.
Right.
Related sort of to this kind of creepypasta thing, one of the methods of telling stories that I talked about earlier was environmental storytelling in video games.
Right.
But there's also the way of using a video game because it's a game specifically to tell a story. I'm not going to spoil it, but the same way that I believe that Watchmen can only be told in its truest sense in a comic book, I believe that BioShock can only be told in its truest sense in a video game. I'm not going to explain why, but there's a lot of elements of, player choices and options that make it so that that game and its moral can only be told in the method of a video game.
Mm-mm.
There's a other video game that is very popular on YouTube and was, it was popular about a year ago, where people were making video essays about it. And it's called My House. Have you ever heard of it, Eric?
Maybe briefly. It doesn't spark anything when you say it, so.
So it is a mod for the original Doom.
Okay.
Does that ring any more bells?
That does not. That
Okay.
rang less bells.
So it's a mod for the original Doom, and it sort of has these aspects of an ARG, of like an alternative reality game, where this person would like make posts on like Doom forums and like Google Drive and all these places and documents about like, hey, I made this mod a while ago back when Doom was popular, here it is. And playing through the game, you're not only playing a Doom game that happens to take place in like, oh, I made it a residential house. I built it off of my childhood home and then populated it with the Doom monsters. But there's this ongoing narrative that unravels as you play, and it plays with things like the expectations of what is possible in a Doom mod. Like in the original Doom, there's no such thing as a vertical axis. Like you cannot go up and down in the original Doom. You cannot have a room that's above another room because that's physically impossible on the game engine. But in this, they have a room above another room, so like that's creepy. And it goes on to tell the story. That again, I'm not going to spoil here. You can look it up. There's a couple great videos explaining the narrative of the game. But the way it tells its story in a way that can only be told in a Doom mod, because the expectations of how Doom works are necessary in making you feel scared, is so cool to me.
That is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. That's really the last I have to say on alternative storytelling, unless you have some other examples, Eric.
Alternative storytelling. Not particularly, not at the moment.
All right. Well, do you have any regular storytelling stories that you'd like to impart to our audience?
I could have some regular stories that I could impart to our regular audience.
Let's hear some of those.
Well, I don't want to dwell on it too much. I don't want to overload anyone. I went back to the mall, played some Lorcana in a local tournament, got second place. Yay! The real stories are, hey, if you drive a car, you need to know the rules of the road, and you need to be good. You need to be a good driver, please. Sometimes we have to take highways in the world, and those highways require cars, and those cars have sets of rules associated with them, right? If you're driving a big slow thing, you like can speed past it, but like if you're going to merge, you need to be particularly aware if you can safely pass it or if you need to slow down because it's a big car. I have a big car. And so going on to the highway, leaving the mall, you gotta merge on. And there were two lanes where you could merge on. Well, two lanes, right? And those lanes merged, and then that lane merged into the highway. So rather, I'm in the right lane because I am a beat car, and beat cars go in the right lane because they are slow. As I drive, and the two lanes eventually merge into one lane so they can merge onto the highway. There are cars in the left lane. And rather than, I don't know, slow down, they speed up and they get side by side with me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going to have an accident. I can only do so much. Brake as much as I can. And thankfully, they just go past me. And I was like, phew, thank goodness. And then the car behind that car saw that I braked, so then they speed past me, and then they merge into the highway. And I'm like, why? You people can just we're about to get onto the highway. Just be behind me. Don't cause an accident. And then, it ended, and that was fine. So then I had to leave the highway at a certain point so I could get back to our little bridge. And so
Is this the same? Is this the same van as the bucket incident?
yes, it is the same van as the bucket
Okay.
incident is B car.
Okay.
So it's
Big
it's
car.
it's not it's like 7 feet tall, however 12 feet, 20 feet. I don't know. I'm better in metrics. Um, long
Oh, no, 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 no. Reference to an
and
old episode.
and you got this is why like I drive very defensively, especially with it because I don't it's not going to end well for anyone because it's big. So naturally, as you leave the highway, right, you take your off ramp. What's the number one thing you want to see exiting the highway? Gibbity.
No other cars.
Great, great, yeah. So you know what's not no other cars? You know what's like the exact opposite?
A car that's like parked, stopped in the middle of the exit ramp.
Kind of. It's a car driving towards you.
No, my God.
And I was just like, what are you doing? What are we doing? And thankfully, I don't even know if this was thankful or not. Like there was a little side space of like an abandoned building or a shoulder. It was dark, I couldn't really see, and they like pulled off onto that, and there was no accident. So that's fantastic. But why are you driving into oncoming traffic, sir? Or ma'am, or
This
it
guy was
doesn't matter.
driving the wrong way, like up a
Yes,
ramp or something.
yes.
That's
A
insane.
hundred and like I they just pulled off into what I believe was some sort of gas station. But it was like 11 or midnight and like everything was closed and it's like okay, either you're a drunk driver and you had one moment of clarity or divine intervention came along or something and you pulled off or like you just wanted to go to this building so bad you drove the wrong way. Um, Jersey drivers need to get a grip, is what I'm saying. All
Yeah,
drivers
no, that's
need to get a
wild.
grip, but like, I think that's the most crazy driving. I think that beats the bucket for me in terms of like crazy Asper Cream driving stories.
What?
What? You've never heard of Asper Cream? It's a
No,
it's
what?
You've never heard of Asper? Okay, hang on. So yeah, that was kind of
But so I'm
terrifying. I have done fishtails in the road because of weather. I have unfortunately, accidentally, some animals may not have lived, and I don't think much compares to a car driving at you while you're also driving because they're there's so few responses you can do. Even if you brake, like they can still drive at you. Uh, Bad time. Please be responsible, people.
yes,
I'm
please
venting
try.
to our audience. I'm sure our audience is lovely. I just have a lot of feelings and they need to go somewhere. Thank you for being our group therapy in the comment section.
As somebody who lost their brother due to a bad driver, I always, always, always tell people that they need to drive safer.
Yeah.
There's no risk that's worth taking.
Yeah. And especially like whatever you think is like, oh, I need to get to this place. It can wait half an hour. It's fine.
Yeah. Never a reason to look at your phone. Never a reason to, go too fast. It's, you got to remember you're driving a deathmobile.
Yeah. Cars are giant metal death boxes. And we're all just so used to it that we forget that sometimes.
So when you said Asper cream or something, I'm guessing that you were trying to censor yourself saying the A word.
Maybe,
but,
maybe not. Maybe I just like Asper cream.
Yeah. Please explain to me what that is.
You've never heard of Asper cream?
No.
Well, back in the day on cable television, believe it or not, there were ads that you could not skip or avoid with things called commercials. And these commercials could have anything in or with them, as long as they were like appropriate. Asper Cream had one of the catchiest jingles on the air at the time because it was, "You can bet your sweet Asper Cream," because they knew what they were doing. Asper Cream, its main purpose, is to reduce itching and pain from skin conditions such as scrapes, insect bites, etc. Stuff like that. So you know.
I have never heard of this in my entire life.
Are you serious? Did you watch TV growing up? Hello?
I have never ever seen whatever commercial you're talking about. I've never heard that jingle. I have
It's
never
a
heard
yellow
of that product.
tube. I don't like. Do you have a scrape and you can't scratch it? Did you get poison ivy? Well, you can bet your sweet Asper cream.
That's crazy.
Get out of here. Get out of here. Next, you're gonna tell me you haven't seen commercials
what?
for like, I don't know, silly goo. Put it in your sister's hair.
No, I haven't. What kind of commercials did they have in the South?
That wasn't even the South. That was just everywhere. What do you mean?
I have literally no idea.
Like,
I've never
you've
heard any
never
of these.
seen...
Do you know about the Tiger poster?
You gotta give me a little more than that.
And the Tiger poster.
The Tiger poster.
The Tiger poster.
No. I mean, maybe...
Oh my
What's
god.
the Tiger poster? I gave you more to work with than Asper.
And the Tiger poster. So it was this commercial that ran for years and years and years for this magazine called Zoo Books.
Yeah.
And it would be like, if you call right now, you'll get a year-long subscription to Zoo Books and the Tiger poster.
You're right.
And he said that like twice in the commercial, and it's just very iconic.
So you remember that, but you don't remember like...
It's not that I don't remember whatever you were
You
just
never
saying. It's
watched
that I've
it.
never heard of it before in my entire
I
life.
don't know. Okay. The Silly Goo one came on for commercials on like Cartoon Network and whatever. The Asper Cream one came on for like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune and whatever.
No, and I used to watch Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune every night, so...
Alright, well, you're bad, I guess. I don't know who hasn't heard of Asper Cream, especially because of the jingle. Because it was the most like, we're cursing, but we're not cursing.
That's crazy.
So, you know.
I guess on that note, like you said, I gotta get out of here. So I guess I'll be leaving Slapendipity Hobos of Happy Slappy Town for the week.
Gibbity, you need to leave me alone. I'm bushed.
Ba-da-da-da-da-da. And with that, we will see you guys next time. Remember, you can always leave a comment if you're watching this on YouTube. You can always email us at slapendipity@gmail.com. And next week, we'll be back with an amazing story of what me and Eric are going to go do for the next, 4 hours. because we're going to go watch Fall Guy and then go to the gym. So you can hear all about that next
Watched
week.
Civil War. It was good. Kind of depressing.
It was good. I watched Civil War, and then the next week I watched Challengers. So now I need to go watch a movie with Emma Stone.
I don't see how that relates.
Because Civil War is about Kirsten Dunst, and Challengers is about Zendaya, so now I need to go watch the other Spider-Man's girlfriend, okay? It makes perfect sense.
We've strayed too far from Asper Cream. It was a simpler time.
Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.